呼ぶときはビスケでいいわさ。
Biscuit, I like it.
その代わり教えを請う身として私の言いつけは絶対
How's
守る
Killua
こと。
going to react to that?
だから呼ばねえし怖ねえよ。ゴンもなんとか言ってやれよ。
俺たちにはウィングさんがいるしね。
Yeah.
そうそう、俺たちにはちゃんと師匠がいるから、その人以外に教わる気ないね。
ウィングってもしかしてメガネかけた寝癖坊や？いつも
She knows him.
そう出してる？
Yeah, that's the one.
私の教え子だわよ。ウィングは。
マジ？
すごいや。
That'll get him.
あいつが師匠とはね。
Okay.
立つのは早いこと。裏試験に合格したわ
Is that
け
new theme?
また試験官やってみたい。
Hey. Experienced, of
あんたた
course.
ちにしてみたら師匠の師匠なんだから。あんたもなかなか頑固だわね。好きだけど、そういうの。入手難
Right, that
度は
little
ランク
puffy
3。
thing.
問題はあんたたちがゲットできなかったこのカードを簡単にゲットできる奴らがここにはたくさんいるってことだ。
Yeah. It's a different
明らか
level.
に戦闘面であんたたちより上の、しかも邪悪な奴に今遭遇したら。
You're toast.
座って。
Whoa.
私の後ろに敵がいる。
Ooh, Gon and Killua didn't pick up on this. Look at this
ガ
guy.
キが3人か。俺たちは気配を感じ取るところか
Right, right.
気づくことさえできないレベルか。どうすればいい？
切り替えが早いわね。頭のいい子だ。あんたたちの意見
Look at
は？
this.
このまま3人で行動する。
でもあえて別行動をとる。
Mm.
私が一人になったら敵は 100% 私を
Right,
狙う。
draw him out.
目安はあの岩山。着いたら今度は絶。素早く戻ってくるこ
Of
と。
course, the guy has no idea that's not
二重
a.
尾行だな。
Ooh.
え？そんなに言うならいいわよ。
このババ
gives right gives her a reason to.
もうやってらんないわ。バイバイ。
He didn't.
おい、けいけ、せいせいするよ。
あ、失敗か。
He got there. He got there in the end. Killua, he got caught by surprise there.
すっげえよ、あの女。
Mm.
俺警戒してたんだぜ。何があっても動けるように。
Yet
ほっぺたがジンジンするまで何されたかもわかんなかった。
she's good. Hmm. Ah.
切った髪の毛を食うことで。
Oh, does he gain?
髪の毛の持ち主でさ
おう
え知り得ない肉体の情報。肉質、
Ah.
気の有無、遺伝的強さ。
It's like a database for DNA almost.
全て把握し、
So he should
で可愛がって。実年
he
齢57
should realize.
俺にはわかる。見た目には現れぬ。うちに秘められた極限をも超えた。
Yeah, let's discuss
鍛
that.
錬の結晶。
Oh, interesting.
舞踏家として手合わせ願いたい。
Yeah, he
た
understood.
だのクズじゃなさそうだわね。
Ooh. Oh, look at this animation. So is this guy? Yeah, that Hatsu. I'm not sure if it falls
運
under.
が良い。年での戦いならあんたを殺してた。
相手は決して弱くない。こいつが桁違いに強い。
あんたたちならすぐにゲームオーバーだったわね。ここに来て私が知ってるだけでもすでに2回あんたたちは死に
Second
かけ
time.
た。この運がいつまで続くかしら。どうしてもなんかつけて呼ぶならビスケちゃまにして。
Biscuit Chama. That's a new one.
なんでここに来たの？
Go on, go
まあ
on.
もちろんゲームクリアのためだけど目的は宝石よ。
Ooh.
宝石？
ブループラネット。
Blue planet.
あんたたちは
Gemstone.
実はこのゲーム、俺の親父が作ったものなんだ。
あんたの親父さんで。
Ooh, is she going to
ジンフレ
know?
ックス。
ジン？
知ってる？
そりゃ知ってるわよ。有名人だからね。
Right, right.
前にネテロ会長が念能力者としては5
Whoa,
本の指に入るって言ってた
okay.
わさ。
It's not that surprising given the things I know so far, but still, wow.
チャンスをあげる。2週間この2人の攻撃をかわすこと。
You use him as
そ
part
れ
of
が
the
できたら
training.
見逃してあげる。決定打を浴びて悶絶したり立ち上がれなくなったらあんたを殺す。奴自身も賞金首。凶悪な切り裂きが
Oh,
よ。
okay. I mean,
始め。
Sweeney Todd over here. Ooh.
何ぼさっとしてるんだい。回復を図ってるんだよ。やらせといていいの。
Oof.
奴がダメージを受けていなきゃ目を潰されていた。
Oh.
願ったりだ。1週間もこうして休めばだいぶ回復する。体さえ治れば奴らを
Hold your horses. Oh, here comes Gon's Hatsu. Oh, there's a lot of rocks.
岩を盾に。
He caught on.
正解。我慢比べじゃ勝ち目ないよ。あんたたち。
Oh, look at this animation.
ダメージを受けているとはいえ、半日でビノールと押してきている。
Right.
生死が絡む極限の戦いを意識してからの動き。悪くない。この二人。原石。
Yeah.
目に宿る意志の固さ。まだ内に秘められたままの
Bottomless potential. She is kind of similar to Hisoka in a sense.
いかようにも変えることができる。まさにダイヤモンド。
Right.
冷たく静かな青。一見危うく揺れる色彩も熱処理によ
Fragile.
って
Is that right?
的な強さを手に入れる。まさにサファイア。
Wow. Hey, that's fascinating
光
insight.
るものってなぜこうも心ときめくのかしら。鍛えるわよ。
これは
Now they can
岩
hide.
の密林。敵の動きを封じつつ自ら姿を隠せる。
Got Mini of Vogan over here.
ゲームオーバーだぜおっさん。
ダメだ。切るわ。
Oh.
まだまだ時間はある。1対1であいつを圧倒できるまで続けよう。え、今やめるのはもったいないよ。俺たち今すごく調子がいいもん。
今度はこっちだ。ミンチにしてやるぜ。
うん、でも明日からにしようよ。おじさんも体を休めた方がいい。だい
Okay.
ぶ動きが鈍くなってるよ。確かにダメージ受けてる上にヘトヘトのこいつに2人がかりじゃこの先どんなプレイヤーにも勝てやしないな。
今の研ぎ澄まされた二人のアンテナをごまかすのはあんたじゃ無理だわね。
Whoa.
あら、財布がないわ。
Oh no. I know exactly how they're about to react to this. It's him. Interesting. That he thought back to that? Just an innocent kid?
奴の動きが遅い。いや、
Right.
奴が早くなってん
Yeah.
だ。こんなにも違うのか。
Wow.
実力が拮抗した相手と命がけで戦闘した時に得る経験値。
It's a great looking episode.
俺だってこんな生き方したかったわけじゃ。
だから嫌だったのよ。
こっちの方が近道だって言ったのお前じゃねえか。
別に見返りが欲しかったわけでも感謝されたかったわけでもない。
Wow. Beautiful. Beautiful stuff. I mean, the animation. But wow, look at this.
殺せ。
なんで殺すわけないじゃん。だって俺たちおかげですごく上達し
Interesting.
たもん。
Okay, gone.
ありがとうビノールトさん。
Here's an unexpected thank you.
ただ
Oh,
まともに生きたかっただけだ。
yeah. Gone's spirit kind of reminds him of himself. Wow.
出たら自首
Okay.
する。
ゴン、あ
Gone.
んたはフローレス。傷のない原石。でもその純粋さゆえ危うくもあるんだわね。
Yeah. Right. Here's yet another person who's noticed
それじゃ
his
朝ドラへ向かうわよ。
nature. Wow. I think that was a great side character, really. Look at this.
あれだ。じゃあデパート探して。
Oh, they're training all right.
ではこれから再びマサドラへ向かう。ただし今度はまっすぐ。
まっすぐって
Oh,
もしかして
clear a path. Yeah, they're training all right.
今日から寝るときは常にこう。ロープを離しちゃダメ。たまに私がロープを切るから。休んでる時も頭の一部は緊張させとくように。
よく親父にやられたな。この手の訓練。
So he'll be fine? How about him? Ooh. Oh.
ゴン、頭。
大丈夫。
念を込めたパンチならなんとか壊せると思う。あ、
Careful though. You don't want to cave in.
シャベルも体の一部って考えるんだ。
Shrub the shovel
そうか。
and then
オーラでシャベルをまとえば
or
俺の
aura,
力
yeah.
が強化される。
Mm.
すごいよ。岩がプリンみたい。
気づいたよ
This
ね。
is training,
天の
proper
工業
training.
技シュー。
Ooh.
マサドラに着く頃には第一段階が終了する。
ビスケの過酷な修行は二人をどんな姿へ
I
と
mean,
進化させる
you
のであろう
already
か
see the shift.
今日紹介するのはブループラネット。
Blue planet,
ビスケ
right?
がこのゲームに来た目的の一つだね。こんな石ころのためにわざわざ来るなんて。
Yeah, she seems to be into
こんなもの好きだな、
gemstones.
あのババア。
Shaping them as well, of course. Okay, let's get into it, folks. I mean, by the end of that episode, it's really quite clear that indeed Biscuit Chama, and I'm guessing that's kind of like a mix of, Sama and Chan, right? So you've got Chama, but yeah, it's really clear that she is the perfect next sensei, the next master in their journey, right? The next step of their education, as I like to say. I mean, I actually think the boys are really quite lucky to have her as the next sensei, as their next sensei, their next master, who also ends up being, Wing's master as well, their own last sensei, most recent sensei, I suppose. So, that in itself really kind of almost immediately establishes in their minds, right? Specifically Killua's mind as well, because he's the one who's, kind of a bit standoffish about this. I suppose Gon is a little bit standoffish as well, but it's more so because Killua is kind of, trying to get something out of Gon as well, getting him to say something about this. But Killua specifically needed a bit more convincing than Gon, right? And again, that's in line. Right, that's in character, because again, Killua is the one that tends to really kind of think it out, really assess the situation, really assess the character of the person that is in front of them, and that is trying to actually, kind of become a part of their life in the near future, for the near future, essentially. But again, you go back to a few episodes, him claiming that now he's not an assassin anymore, but he is a hunter. So he has to think like a hunter. He has to take those risks as a hunter, right? Because that's a path he's chosen. So, that kind of comes back into play as well. But, Togashi does it really quite effectively in terms of, them understanding this is something that truly could be great for them, right? More than great for them and their growth. And this is really effectively and quickly established through the things that she is able to, showcase and pick up on, and Gon and Killua can't, right? Through that understanding, they understand. And again, this focus is mostly on Killua. And, the second half of the episode is more so a focus on Gon, I think. Gon is really quite clutch, right? You see the clever side of Gon quite a bit in the second in the second half of the episode, right? That he has it in him. He does. That he can think outside of the box, that he does have situational awareness. And then, of course, in addition to that, he is able to do these things under pressure, be it his rock strategy, right? Be it him essentially, kind of introducing a new application of Nen, or Ten rather, to be a bit more specific. He kind of figures out that, okay, if I treat this as an extension of my body, right, the shovel itself, then I can actually shroud it, right, in aura. And of course, you see Bisky's reaction. This is something she is, trying to promote by putting them in these kinds of situations, right? This is the type of thinking that she's hoping comes to them. And, in terms of Bisky's approach, her style, a major component of it appears to be discipline, right? Because by the end of this episode, you see that she is instilling quite a bit of discipline into these boys, right? She's cracking down. And, I think this is just kind of scratching the surface, because I feel like she is going to push them as the episodes go on, right? As the arc plays on, as the training saga essentially plays out. And I think at some point she is going to be pushing them to their absolute limits. And, speaking of breaking points, I do have something I do want to explore a little bit later, right? And it's in relation to Gon, right? And also a bit of a parallel to, our side character of the episode. And I've got to say, it's a fantastic side character. Yes, of course. Ultimately, Benol, I believe Benol is meant to be a plot device, for this episode, for the plot of this episode specifically even. But, it's not as simple as just that though, right? It could have been, but Tagashi said, no, I'll give you a bit of a backstory, right? I'll give you some context. And, I think this approach, it kind of helps once again in the world building of this anime. I really like this approach, right? This bite-sized approach to world building as well, right? Giving a bit of personality and context to a character that is only here essentially for one episode, as far as I know, unless he does kind of make an appearance down the line. It doesn't feel like it's that type of character, but sure, if you ask me, I hope, once he's done serving his time, he gets out and he does kind of get back on a path that he saw for himself all that time ago. Perhaps, a path that he kind of thinks might be the right path at this point in his life, if he gets out, because again, that's a big if given his crimes, right? But, he took a big step, in atoning for a lot of it, turning himself in. And, the thing is, I actually got teary-eyed, right? Again, this is subjective, because I'm sure for many it didn't quite have that effect on them, but it did for me. At one point, he's talking about how this is not the path he had in mind for himself, right? He didn't want to lead this kind of life, and I don't know, at that point, and this is during that sequence of him just kind of fighting Gon and Killua. Right before he ultimately gives up and makes a request of Gon to just kill him, right? And then of course, I'll get into Gon's interesting reaction and everything that kind of comes out of that in terms of interesting talking points and setup moments, essentially. But yeah, the moment he's speaking of that, right, of his life and the trajectory of his life, I couldn't help but think of his younger self, right? Depicted a little bit earlier. In quite a despicable scene, essentially, right? You see he had a traumatic experience, and that childhood trauma essentially ended up being the breaking point, right? One bad day, one bad moment, to tip over the scales. And yeah, I think there is something to be looked at there in terms of the parallels that it is presenting, perhaps. Or at least that one parallel between this character and Gon, right? Because again, essentially Gon reminded him of his younger self, right? Looking back at him, that light, that hope, that attitude, all of that reminded him of his younger self. But yeah, I'll come back to all of this, the parallels. But yeah, going back to my point about getting a little bit emotional, getting a little bit teary-eyed during that scene, at that point, I'm just thinking of that youngster, that innocent youngster, right? You see he's a little bit shy, he's timid, he's certainly quite malnourished. And then of course, there you also have another, bite-sized addition to the world building. Once again, it kind of once again goes to that notion of the poverty of the world of this anime, right? More often than not, a lot of these characters, they come from this type of background. just quite recently, I got to see, the Phantom Troop, right? And got to learn a bit more about the Phantom Troop and, Meteor City and all of that, right? And the type of place it is, and, the type of people that come from there, and the harsh reality of that existence. And then, of course, I know Leorio also comes from a similar background, perhaps not quite Meteor City, but, they made it clear and established it really quite effectively that, yeah, he's not from a privileged background or anything. And then now you have Benol, right? Yeah, I don't know, man. Even thinking about that, it makes me a little bit sad, because, it makes you think about real people, real life, right? There's kids like this out there, thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids like this out there, millions, right? Billions even. And then, of course, the aftermath of him catching a beatdown, a brutal beatdown at that imagery of him laying on the ground, that just, that hurt. That made me angry. But yeah, ultimately that treatment that he does, receive from those people, that traumatic event that happens, ultimately changed his trajectory entirely, right? He ends up going down a path that he simply did not envisage for himself at all. And yeah, now you see years later, decades later, this encounter with Gon and Killua, and perhaps, specifically Gon in that moment, kind of brought him back to that moment, that really specific moment before everything changed forever in his life, before it ended up creating all of that hate in his heart, right? Again, and that sent him down a dark path, really dark path, because he does end up becoming a mass murderer. And see, the crazy thing is, that kid that he used to be, Benol, that is, he's actually really quite timid and innocent, right? Much more so than Gon right now at this age. But then look at the things he ended up being capable of, right? Because of that moment, because of that breaking point. So of course, the parallel there with Gon is an interesting one, isn't it? Because, in Gon, you do have someone who is really quite hopeful, full of light. Yet, there's always been signs of perhaps the darkness within, right? And, the really interesting thing here is that, the yin and yang aspect of it, Gon and Killua, you can apply the opposite to Killua, right? The light in the darkness for Killua, right? And you see it day by day, episode by episode, or, story arc by story arc, so far at least, that Killua is changing quite a bit. And who's been the catalyst for that? It's been Gon, this friendship that they've developed, right? This person that's come into his life, that's allowed the light in the darkness to kind of shine through, right? For Killua. But then also in Gon, you do have that, notion of perhaps the darkness within, right? One of the more exciting things, or one of the most, fascinating moments of this anime, anytime I get it, is, these people, experienced people, assessing people like Gon and Killua. But, Gon specifically, right? Because there's something really quite fascinating going on there. Because you've got people like Biscuit now, the most recent. You've got people like Zeppal. Even Wing had a lot of interesting insight on the matter. Though, his was more so about both Gon and Killua, I think. Though, there's a few moments, he does assess Gon as well, specifically. But of course, one of the things that's been common is these people, these experienced people, from all kinds of different backgrounds, even someone like Zeppal, is that they pick up on his really, his really fascinating nature, right? And, here you have someone like Biscuit, one of the most experienced up until this point, that's come into their lives. I mean, first of all, she's complimentary on his, flawless nature, right? That you're a flawless, perfect gem. But, that pure nature, could be your undoing at some point. So, it's really setting it up at this point, isn't it, right? It's kind of planting the seeds of, this potential, moment down the line, right? Again, if you kind of look at potential breaking points, one bad day, one bad moment, I feel like it is certainly setting up that, at some point Gon is going to be tested, right? His limit is going to be tested, right? And that he might actually reach that breaking point, right? And if indeed he does kind of have a breaking point similar, right? A tipping point similar to someone like, young Benol, how exactly could that look? how could that play out? And in terms of how that could potentially look, you kind of go back to another really interesting moment in this episode, right? You go to Bisky's assessment of both Gon and Killua, right? There's a lot of fascinating stuff there about Killua as well, but let's kind of focus on Gon for the moment, right? She believes that he's got this rock hard conviction that there's this hidden bottomless potential within Gon, right? Now imagine that type of force, again, once it's been, shaped and cut through training, as she put it, Bisky that is. Now imagine the type of, unstoppable force that, Bisky is alluding to, through kind of harnessing that bottomless potential. Imagine that person, again, having a breaking point, reaching a breaking point. And once he reaches that breaking point, how exactly could that look? How could that play out? I mean, at this point, it's really quite clear that, I'm going to get to see some fascinating changes at some point for Gon. And that's why I kind of leaned into the whole, the light within the darkness and the darkness within the light analogy for this. And I keep kind of going on about this, breaking point, right? This what if situation. Let's kind of try to give some context to this, potential breaking point, or any potential breaking point, right? The tipping point, the catalyst, much like Benol's catalyst. I think it would have to be something really quite personal, right? His friends. If someone he knows, someone like Killua, someone like Kurapika, someone like Leorio, someone down the line perhaps that I haven't even met yet, that could end up having a major impact on Gon and his life. Any of these types of connections being put in danger, or potentially even dying, that is that's the type of tipping point or breaking point I'm kind of alluding to, that maybe could one day push him over the edge. But before I forget, let's kind of touch up on Bisky's assessment of Killua. I believe she refers to him as a calm blue, right? A cool calm blue at that. But the thing that really kind of stood out to me is, it's essentially the opposite of Gon, isn't it? She does refer to him as fragile, take your pick. But, quickly going back to Benol, and, just this idea, this notion of him, maybe getting a second chance once he does potentially come out of jail, out of prison, again, that remains to be seen if he ever even comes out. And again, this is just one of those things that us as fans can kind of just speculate on. The thing that is really quite distinct, though, is his ability. Right now, like I mentioned during the episode, it doesn't really quite fit into his Hatsu doesn't really quite fit into anything immediately. So the nature of it, it feels really quite unique, special. So, a part of it does kind of feel like he could be a specialist, right? Because it also kind of is reminiscent of, abilities such as Pakunora's. But that's not the point. The actual category isn't the point I'm trying to make here. The point is, that is a really special ability. Right? Yeah, he's been using it for something, quite nefarious for quite a long time. But imagine him being, a private detective, him being on the police force, him being a medic. Imagine how useful that could be, right? And I feel like if he didn't have that one bad day, that one bad moment, right? The catalyst, the tipping point, it could have been a totally different type of life for him. Right? Using this ability for something else entirely. So, it's interesting to think about these things. The notion of what could have been. Hell, even if you kind of look beyond any of those specific professions I mentioned, just imagine giving people that information. There's a lot of rich people. This showed me there's a lot of filthy rich people, just in this last arc, in the York New City arc, that might pay obscene amounts for some of this information. Right, to learn some of this stuff about themselves. But yeah, once he does get a read on Bisky, right, and all of her, traits and everything, her buildup, he immediately understood, the type of force he is up against, right? And there you see, that, Bushido spirit, as they call it, kind of, take over, right? He actually legitimately wanted to challenge her, right, in a respectful duel. And of course, she handles him really quite easily, quite effectively. But the fact that he does decide to put down those blades, or the scissors rather, and go hand to hand, that came out of the fact that he understood that this is not just some pushover, right? This is essentially one of a kind type person. And he said something really quite interesting, didn't he? Right? Again, kind of going back to my comment about the Bushido spirit, right? I think he said, my fighting spirit dictates or insists that I challenge you to a duel. But even so, this D-ranked opponent, it's really quite clear that at full tilt, he would have been too much for Gon and Killua. And again, that's a D-rank opponent. Right, so yeah, there's some monsters out there on Great Island. There's some formidable opponents, potential opponents out there, and they're not ready for it. Gon and Killua are not ready for it. Hell, she actually pointed out something really quite interesting, didn't she? I think she said, this is the second time, or this makes the second time I've seen you hardly escape, death or near-death experiences. Something like that, right? I think she said death. So I don't think it's meant to be something that happened off screen. Right. And, she this might have been through or, during that phase of her kind of tailing them, right, shadowing them, observing them from a distance. Surely this must have been something that was on screen and that I have seen. Right. So if you go down that path, you start kind of looking at, situations that possibly could kind of fit the bill. Right. And, one major situation that really kind of, sticks out as of this point is, again, that faction trying to recruit them, right? And again, Biscuit was present. She was there. She didn't, at that point, she didn't really even have to, observe them from a distance. She was a part of that whole scenario. So is she referring to that, right? And if that is the case, is it then also kind of, referring to, okay, yeah, if indeed they joined up there, that could have been really bad for them, right? Again, kind of alluding to the possibility of spies and, again, maybe one of those guys actually being the bomber. But around the time of that scene specifically, you kind of have a back and forth. Gon asked Biscuit about her, intentions, her, goals and all of that. Of course, all of it kind of begins with wanting to clear the game, but, she specifies that she's here for a really specific jewel. So, jewels and gems are kind of her thing, right? Even the ones that are really quite raw, right? The idea of shaping and cutting through training, that's really quite exciting to her as well, right? I think she said something like, why does my heart skip a beat, at the idea of that, of shaping this raw potential. Again, really kind of similar to Hisoka in that sense. So, I suppose my approach or my assessment of that in the last episode's discussion was on the right track. But yeah, jewels and gems, that's her thing. So she's looking for a really specific one as well. Blue Earth, I believe Blue Planet, right? But then through that really simple conversation, the simple back and forth about just goals and, intentions and all of that, you get a bit more insight for Jing, right? And it's for both us audience and Gon. And it turns out that indeed she does know him, right? Or she's heard of him at least, because apparently he's really quite famous, right? And not only that, there's confirmation that he's one of the top 5 Nen users on the planet. And this was according to the chairman himself. So yeah, that's yet another fascinating piece of information for Gon, isn't it? And there's a fantastic transition as it goes from that shot of Jing to Gon's face. And there's another really beautiful transition a little bit later on, right? It's young Benol and Gon, because again, Gon's spirit, his approach, all of that, it reminded Benol of his younger self, right? The person he used to be, that innocent kid. But again, I say innocent kid. In that scene that I am speaking of at this point, Gon is really quite thankful. He's smiley. He's legitimately thankful to Benol, right? Because, he understands that, over the span of these past few days, Benol has played an integral part, or he has been an integral component of the growth that both Gon and Killua have experienced. Right. And, that's the thing I really loved about this as well. There's a real sense of progression and growth, right? And believable growth at that, in terms of scaling, realistic. And of course, this is the moment Biscuit kind of, comments on his nature once again, right? That it could be your undoing one day. But yeah, here he is, legitimately thankful to Benol, this mass murderer, for the role he played, for the opportunity that he provided just by being a part of this. Because ultimately, as Killua noticed, they needed someone like this, right? Or, it's a totally different type of training. If it is against someone that does kind of present a legitimate danger, right? So yeah, Gon is certainly quite thankful, and none of his past mattered at that moment, right? Yeah. Interesting. Most interesting, isn't it? They've alluded to this, but also finally, let's kind of focus a bit on Biscuit. The thing I really like about this approach is that, yes, the physical appearance is still interesting to say the least. But the thing I really liked here is that it's really quite clear that this is an authoritative figure, right? The voice itself, the voice acting performance is really really quite impactful in that sense. It doesn't feel like I'm listening to a young girl, right? It feels like she does hold that, I don't know, experience, that authority, right? It sells it, I think, really quite effectively. And there's a moment, there's a close-up of the eyes, right? These are big, anime eyes, but I think the eyes actually look like the eyes of an older person. Look at that frame. Something about that almost immediately just made me think of, okay, these aren't the eyes of a young person. At least that was my reading of that really specific frame. It's a close-up of the eyes. Again, that might not be the reason it was a close-up, but I certainly kind of latched onto that aspect of it. To me, it felt like the eyes of an older person, right? And then of course you've got the mature voice of someone that is, much older, authoritative. In a sense, it also kind of reminds me of Izumi Sensei from Fullmetal Alchemist. Similar type of tone and approach, right? Again, she's all about discipline. And also Biscuit bringing up the fact that she used to be an examiner, and that it could be something nice to go back to. I'm thinking back to the silhouette shot from all that time ago of all the examiners, right? There's still a few that I didn't really get to see yet. She's one of them, isn't she? I remember she's standing in the back, right? And the thing that really stood out is, again, the ponytails. Even though she lost one of them in this episode, she's right there. She's right there, and that kind of reminded me altogether, right? That there's others that I haven't seen just yet. But yeah, I think that should do it for this one, folks. If you enjoyed that, consider dropping a like, consider dropping some comments, give me your thoughts. If you are interested in early access to the next few episodes right now, perhaps timer-based full length or full opacity, consider checking out the Patreon page and potentially supporting the channel in the process. The links are in the description and the pinned comment. Also links to social media if that's your thing. Right then, thank you so much for joining me, folks, and thank you for your time, because time is precious. It really is. And I do hope to see you again soon for the next one. Until then, take it easy.